Carl Jung exposed the truth: sex controls you more than you think. What if I told you that the sexual thoughts you try to ignore are actually the key to unlocking your deepest truth? Carl Jung didn't just explore the unconscious. He revealed that your desires are not dirty. They're divine messages from your soul. This isn't about lust. This is about power, identity, and becoming whole. Part 1, the hidden force: why sex is more than desire. We live in a world where sex is everywhere, and yet no one really talks about it, honestly. We scroll past it in ads. It's buried in our music. It's baked into our movies and shows. It dominates headlines, manipulates entire industries, and fuels billions of clicks every single day. But when it comes to admitting how deeply it controls our thoughts, our choices, our very identity, we pretend it doesn't. Carl Jung saw this long before our digital age even began. He believed that sex is not just an act or a need, it's a force. A hidden, explosive psychological energy source that fuels not only our fantasies and fears, but also our deepest urges toward meaning, creativity, and even transformation. And according to Jung, the more we deny it, the more it dominates us. Sex is psychological energy, not just biology. When most people hear the word libido, they automatically think of sexual desire. Freud certainly did. But Jung took it further. He saw libido as the raw energy of the psyche itself, a symbolic current of life force that could express itself sexually. Yes, but also through art, ambition, purpose, obsession, even prayer. To Jung, sex is a metaphor, a primal symbol that emerges when the conscious and unconscious collide. He didn't believe sex ruled us because we're animals. He believed it ruled us because we're conflicted beings. Part light, part shadow, part spirit, part flesh. So when you pretend not to see how sex governs your life, what you're really avoiding is a confrontation with yourselves. Because underneath your goals, your relationships, your spiritual path, and even your failures, Jung says there's a deeper drama at play. The eternal tension between the known and the hidden. And often, that tension is sexual in nature. Why you pretend not to see it? Think about it. How often do you catch yourself being subtly influenced by attraction, desire, or validation? How often do you dress to impress without calling it that? How often do you check to see who liked your post, not just for affirmation, but to feel wanted? How often do you make decisions based on who's watching, or who might desire you? We're taught to downplay it, to intellectualize it, to spiritualize it. But Jung would say this is the perfect example of repression. And repression creates distortion. According to him, what you repress doesn't disappear. It migrates. It becomes the shadow, the unacknowledged part of your psyche that acts out in other ways. Manipulation, shame, addiction, fantasy, control, and even arrogance masked as morality. So when you suppress your sexual nature, it doesn't make you pure, it just makes your unconscious messier. Jung believed that sexuality wasn't bad, it was symbolic. It represented your longing for union, not just with another body, but with your own lost parts, your own inner truth. That's why he warned that those who pretend to be beyond desire often fall hardest into it when the mask slips. Modern culture exposed and yet denied. Here's the paradox of our times. We're obsessed with sex, and yet we're emotionally numb to it. We can talk about it openly on podcasts and post about it in memes, but rarely do we explore what it actually means for our psyche. We either treat it like a joke, a transaction, or a taboo, but rarely do we treat it like what Jung said it was: a message from the unconscious. He would say, our over-sexualized culture is a sign of deeper spiritual starvation, not because we desire too much, but because we understand too little. We confuse stimulation for connection. We mistake possession for intimacy. We pursue bodies but forget souls. And all the while, we pretend we're in control. But the truth is, the more you suppress the meaning behind your desire, the more you become a puppet to it. Sexual symbols and archetypes. According to Jung, our minds don't just process sex as a physical act. They encode it as symbols. That's why you might dream of a snake, a cave, a fountain, or a burning fire. All of these, Jung believed, are sexual symbols from the collective unconscious. They're not just erotic, they're existential. They reflect our yearning for transformation, connection, rebirth, and wholeness. That's why sex shows up everywhere in myths, religions, and art, not because our ancestors were obsessed, but because they were attuned to what we've lost. Sex is never just about sex. It's about the soul reaching for something sacred through something carnal. Jung argued that these symbols point to what you've forgotten about yourself, that your sexual energy is a bridge, a doorway, a key. But if you keep pretending it's just about pleasure, or worse, if you pretend it's not even there, you miss the message entirely. Part 2, Repression in the Shadow, what you refuse to admit. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Nowhere is this more true than in how we deal with sex. We repress it. We deny it. We call it unimportant or just physical. But what we push down into the darkness doesn't disappear. It evolves, festers, and turns into something far more dangerous. It becomes our shadow. What is the shadow? In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the part of ourselves that we disown, deny, or deem unacceptable. It's where we throw all the impulses we don't want to admit we have. Rage, envy, selfishness, and yes, sexual desire. When we grow up in cultures, families, or religions that treat sexuality as shameful or sinful, what do? We bury it. We pretend it's not there. We might even condemn others who express it freely because we're projecting the parts of ourselves we've disowned. But according to Jung, whatever you repress will find another way to express itself. And it usually won't be pretty. The sexually repressed person isn't free. They're fragile. Repression doesn't make you righteous. It makes you unstable. When you suppress your sexuality, it doesn't make you noble, it makes you volatile. It comes out in hyper-judgmental behavior. Sexual obsession disguises purity, us passive-aggressive control over others' choices, and fantasies that dominate your inner world but are disconnected from real intimacy. Addiction to porn, validation, emotional affairs, or harmless flirtation. You may think you're keeping your desires under control, but in reality, they're controlling you through your shadow. You might be a leader, a parent, a preacher, or a spiritual seeker, but none of that shields you from the unconscious. If you don't confront your sexual shadow, it will confront you, usually at the worst possible moment. Projection, the mirror you refuse to look into. Jung talked a lot about projection. That's when we see in others what we cannot face in ourselves. A sexually repressed person might see a confident woman as slutty. They might call someone's freedom dangerous or label someone's beauty as manipulative. But really, they're just reacting to the part of them that longs to be free but isn't allowed to be. The problem with projection is that it creates enemies where there are none. It keeps you locked in moral superiority while secretly being enslaved to what you condemn. That's why Jung insisted that until you integrate your shadow, you're just reacting to life instead of living it. And the shadow doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It shows up in your dreams, in your fantasies, in the way you feel threatened by others. And most of all, it shows up in how you sabotage your own growth. Shame, the silent killer of inner freedom. So many people walk around carrying unspoken shame about their sexual thoughts, feelings, or past experiences. They tell themselves they're broken, dirty, addicted, beyond help. But Jung believes shame wasn't proof of guilt. It was a signal that you've buried something human and real. That doesn't mean you act on every impulse or glorify lust. It means you stop pretending that you're immune to desire. You stop treating your body like the enemy of your soul. Because once you do that, you gain power. You gain integration. You stop splitting yourself in two. And when you stop being at war with your own sexual nature, you become far less likely to be manipulated by it. You can feel attraction without being enslaved. You can notice beauty without obsession. You can desire without shame. That's real spiritual maturity, not denial. But discernment, freedom begins where repression ends. Here's the truth Jung would want you to face. The longer you repress your sexual shadow, the more it will control your life from the background. The more you pretend it's not a big deal, the more it will erupt in ways you don't expect. In breakdowns, in affairs, in numbness, or even in sudden, unexplained spiritual crises. You may find yourself confused about your identity, attracted to things that scare you, obsessed with validation, or emotionally disconnected from the people you love. Not because you're a bad person, but because you've denied a basic truth of your humanity. You are not just a mind. You are not just a soul. You are also a body, a sexual being, a whole person, and your shadow holds the key to becoming whole, not by indulging in every desire, but by acknowledging them, understanding them, facing them with honesty and courage. Part 3, Libido, the root of creativity or destruction. To understand how sex dominates the unconscious mind, we need to talk about one of Carl Jung's most misunderstood concepts, libido. Now, most people associate the word libido strictly with sexual desire. And that's understandable. It's the way Freud defined it. For Freud, libido was the driving force behind almost all human behavior, rooted in primitive sexual instincts. But Jung saw libido differently. He believed that libido was not just sexual energy, it was psychic energy. The fuel that powers the psyche, emotions, instincts, creativity, ambition, spiritual longing, and yes, sexual attraction. In short, libido is life force itself. It can create or it can destroy. Two paths for libido: sublimation or compulsion. According to Jung, we all carry this intense, raw, untamed energy inside us. And depending on how we engage with it, that energy can either lead to higher consciousness or pull us into obsession, addiction, and inner chaos. This is what makes libido so powerful and so dangerous. If you acknowledge it, you can redirect it. You can sublimate sexual energy into art, ideas, music, deep relationships, spiritual growth, great poets, mystics, innovators, and prophets throughout history. Jung would argue, channeled their libido into something larger than themselves. But if you repress it or indulge in it mindlessly, it will dominate you. It will slip into your habits, your fixations, your relationships, and instead of using it, you'll be used by it. The artist and the addict share the same fire. Have you ever noticed how many geniuses seem haunted? How the same energy that fuels incredible creativity also drives them into deep emotional struggle. Broken relationships, even self-destruction. Jung would say they're working with the same force, the libido, but they haven't yet mastered it. One paints what they can't say. One sleeps with people they don't love. One writes symphonies to feel alive. Another drinks or watches porn in secret. In both cases, the libido is screaming to be heard. But only one path leads to transformation. The other leads to collapse. And the difference lies in awareness, in direction, in discipline. Jung believed that sexual energy becomes dangerous only when it is unconscious. As long as you pretend it's not there, or you only chase its gratification, it will remain in the shadows, driving your decisions without you even realizing it. But if you can bring it into the light, if you can understand it, contain it, express it consciously, it becomes the seed of transcendence. Sexual energy as a spiritual catalyst. Here's something radical. Jung implied sexual energy is not anti-spiritual. It is spiritual. In fact, many ancient mystical traditions, from Tantra to alchemy to early Christian mysticism, understood that sexuality and spirituality are not enemies. They are reflections of the same longing for union, union with the other, union with the self, union with the divine. This is why so many dreams, religious visions, and even near-death experiences carry erotic symbolism, not because they're about sex, But because they're about merging, about overcoming division, about finding wholeness. But if your only interpretation of sex is physical, you miss the bigger picture. You stay stuck in gratification, and you never access the transformation. Jung saw libido as multidimensional. Yes, it starts as desire, but it can evolve if you're willing to face it. Desire is direction, not destination. One of Jung's most insightful ideas was this: desire is a compass, not a cage. Just because you want something doesn't mean you have to act on it, but it does mean you should listen to it. Desire often points to unmet needs, buried emotions, unlived potentials. Maybe you desire attention because deep down you crave to be seen. Maybe you desire power because you felt powerless too long. Maybe you desire sex because what you really long for is closeness, connection, and spiritual vitality. Ignoring these longings doesn't free you, it just blinds you. Indulging them mindlessly doesn't fulfill you, it just drains you. But interpreting them, translating them, and choosing to channel them, that's where your power lies. Jung would say, if you want to reclaim your life, start by tracing the roots of your libido. Ask what your longing is really trying to tell you. Because behind every impulse is a message from your soul. The sacred and the sensual are not opposites. We live in a world that splits everything. Sacred versus sensual, spiritual versus sexual, heaven versus earth. But Jung challenged this binary thinking. He believed that the most damaging lie we tell ourselves is that these two forces are enemies. In reality, they are partners, reflections of one another. To embrace your full humanity is to honor both the part of you that longs to ascend and the part of you that longs to merge. Your libido is not a threat to your soul. It is the language your soul uses to communicate longing, beauty, transcendence, and union. If you demonize it, you lose half of who you are. If you glorify it, you fall into chaos. But if you respect it, you can harness it, turning raw desire into spiritual depth. Part 4, the persona and sexual masks. In Jungian psychology, there's a powerful concept that most people don't fully grasp yet. It quietly shapes their entire life. It's called the persona, the mask you wear in public. It's who you pretend to be. It's who you think you're supposed to be. And when it comes to sexuality, this mask becomes especially deceptive. Carl Jung warned that the persona is not your true self, it's your social costume. It's what you wear to gain approval, to avoid judgment, and to function in a world that doesn't want to see what's raw, real, or vulnerable. And when it comes to your sexual identity, sexual feelings, or sexual values, the persona can create a facade so thick, you forget it's even a mask. Sexual identity versus sexual persona. Let's be honest, most people don't present their sexual selves authentically. Instead, they curate a version of themselves that feels safe, acceptable, and likable. You act modest, but internally crave intimacy and attention. You pretend you're above desire, but secretly struggle with temptation. You shame others for their openness, while hiding your own fantasies. You over-sexualize yourself for validation, even though it leaves you feeling empty. The persona can manifest in both extremes. The Puritan persona. I'm pure. I don't think about sex. I'm morally superior. The seductive persona. I'm irresistible. I'm in control. I use sexuality as power. But Jung would say both are masks. And the danger of their persona is this: if you wear it too long, you forget what your real face looks like. The danger of believing your own act. You may think your persona protects you, but it actually imprisons you. Because here's the truth. The more energy you spend maintaining your image, the less energy you have for inner growth. And when your image is sexually clean, but your inner world is full of unanswered questions, urges, and repression, you create what Jung called a split psyche. This internal split leads to hypocrisy and secret lives, sudden breakdowns, chronic dissatisfaction in relationships, plus a sense of emotional numbness or identity confusion. It's not your sexual nature that creates suffering. It's the gap between your real self and your persona. And Jung believed that this disconnect is where much of modern spiritual, emotional, and relational pain comes from. When your persona conflicts with your shadow. If your persona says, "I'm not sexual," but your shadow is full of desire, then you're constantly at war with yourself. And every time you see someone express their sexuality freely, it triggers you not because they're wrong, but because you've been forced to hide. This is why Jung saw integration as the real path to healing, not suppression. You don't have to throw away your values or become someone else, but you do have to stop pretending. Pretending you're not affected by attraction. Pretending you're beyond sex. Pretending you're not lonely or curious or wounded. That pretending is the persona's favorite trick. And the longer you play that role, the harder it becomes to find intimacy, real intimacy with others and with yourself. Social conditioning and sexual masks. Let's take a step back. Why do we wear these masks in the first place? Because we were conditioned to. Culture, religion, family, all of them play a role in shaping what we think is acceptable. From a young age, we're taught, good girls don't talk about sex. Real men don't cry or catch feelings. A desire is sinful. You should only feel sexual after marriage or never at all. So we adapt, we filter ourselves, we put on masks. But here's the cost. You lose the ability to hear your own voice. You start confusing your conditioning with your convictions. You stop exploring your own sexuality with curiosity and honesty because you're too busy staying in character. But Jung would tell you the real journey is not in maintaining the persona, it's in daring to outgrow it. True transformation requires vulnerability. Shedding the persona is terrifying. It means exposing yourself not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. It means admitting, "Well, no, I don't have it all figured out. Only I struggle with desire. I long for connection, even when I act like I don't. And I've hidden parts of myself because I was afraid." But this is the exact kind of honesty that leads to individuation. Jung's term for becoming whole. Not perfect, not pure, but whole. And you cannot be whole while rejecting the parts of you that feel sexual, hungry, or human. You cannot become your true self by wearing someone else's mask. That's why the path forward isn't more performance, it's more integration, more compassion, more courage to say, "This is who I am." Messy, honest, human. Because once you drop the mask, something miraculous happens. You stop performing love. You start experiencing it. You stop manipulating attraction. You start earning intimacy. And you stop fearing your sexual energy. You start understanding its purpose. Part 5, Sexual Symbolism in Dreams. If you want to know what truly dominates your mind, look at your dreams. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious never lies. While we can wear masks in our waking life, the dream world strips us bare. And when it comes to sex, our dreams often reveal more than we're willing to admit to ourselves. Even when we don't dream of explicit sexual acts, Jung showed that sexual energy often hides behind symbols. These symbols aren't just about lust or arousal. They're messages from your psyche, pointing to unresolved conflict, repressed emotion, or deeper yearnings you haven't made conscious yet. So what exactly does sex in dreams really mean? According to Jung, it's almost never about what you think it is. Sexual dreams are not always about sex. You wake up from a dream where you were with someone you don't even like, or maybe someone you haven't seen in years and feel confused or disturbed. Is it temptation? Is it a warning? Is it guilt? Jung would say no. It's symbolic. He believed that the people in your dreams often represent aspects of yourself. That stranger, that lover, that ex, they're not always literal. They may represent your feminine or masculine side, anima or animus, your need for union, your longing for wholeness, or even your creativity trying to seduce its way into your life. Dream sex is rarely about actual physical desire. It's about integration. Your unconscious is using the powerful language of sex to signal connection, union, or conflict between parts of you that are divided. Common sexual symbols in Jungian dreams. Jung identified numerous recurring sexual symbols in dreams. And here's the twist, they often have nothing to do with genitalia or nudity at all. Instead, they emerge in archetypal form. As snakes symbolize primal energy, transformation, temptation, or even healing. A snake in your dream could signal repressed libido or a call to shed your old skin. In caves and tunnels, feminine archetypes, a longing to return to origin, safety, or emotional depth, sometimes tied to maternal instincts or creativity. And swords, towers, arrows, masculine symbols, representing assertion, penetration of truth, or emerging willpower, fire desire, passion, but also purification. A fire in a dream could mean sexual energy that needs to be confronted or redirected. Into water emotional, feminine and fluid. Dreaming of being submerged or splashed can signal emotional overwhelm tied to desire or intimacy. These are not accidents. They are coded messages from your psyche. And Jung believed that interpreting these messages is essential if you want to live with psychological integrity. Because when your dreams speak to you through sex, they're not just trying to arouse you. They're trying to wake you up. The symbol of union. Sex is a psyche metaphor. To Jung, the most profound meaning behind sexual imagery in dreams is the symbol of union. You are not just a body with urges. You are a fragmented soul trying to come back together. And what is sex? At its symbolic root, it is the merging of opposites, masculine and feminine, ego and shadow, conscious and unconscious. It's the longing to be whole. So when your dream shows you a sexual image, it's often showing you a map, a way to reconcile the two sides of yourself that have been fighting, hiding, or denying one another. Maybe you've been too rigid, and your dream sends you a passionate image to soften your defenses. Maybe you've been too passive, and your dream injects masculine symbols to push you toward action. Maybe you've been denying your need for love, so your dream creates an intense erotic encounter, not to indulge you, but to remind you what's missing. The goal is not gratification. The goal is integration. When sexual dreams turn dark, not all sexual dreams are pleasant. Some are confusing. Some feel shameful. Others might even disturb you. Why would your unconscious produce such intense or taboo images? Because the parts of you that are most repressed often show up in extreme form. The dream doesn't care about social norms. It's not trying to protect your image. It's trying to restore balance. So if your sexual dream feels wrong, ask, in what part of myself am I still refusing to accept? What boundaries have I built around intimacy or vulnerability? What fear is trying to surface? Jung would remind you that shadow material always appears exaggerated in dreams, not because you are that thing, but because you've been ignoring it. The more you avoid something, the louder it screams in the unconscious. Dreams don't reveal dirt, they reveal depth. One of Jung's most radical teachings was that dream analysis isn't about moral judgment, it's about meaning. You are not dirty because you had a sexual dream. You are not broken because your psyche is trying to process longing, loneliness, creativity, or trauma. Your dreams are not trying to shame you. They are trying to reunite you with yourself. Because deep down, what you really crave isn't just sex, it's self-knowledge. It's authentic connection. It's psychic freedom. So next time you wake from a sexual dream, don't dismiss it. Don't label it bad or stupid or weird. Instead, ask, what is my soul trying to say through this image? What part of me wants to come alive? And what am I still pretending not to see? Part 6, Jung versus Freud, sex as meaning versus mechanism. No conversation about sex in the unconscious mind would be complete without addressing the two giants of psychology, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. They were collaborators, friends, and eventually ideological adversaries. And at the heart of their divide was a simple but powerful question. What does sex really mean to the human psyche? Freud believed that sex was everything. Jung believed that sex was the beginning of everything but not the end. This difference shaped two completely different visions of the human mind, and it explains why so many people today still misunderstand their own sexuality. Freud's sex is the core of human behavior. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, believed that all human behavior could ultimately be traced back to sexual instincts. For Freud, desire is biological, but libido is erotic. The unconscious is a reservoir of repressed sexual urges. Dreams are wish fulfillment fantasies, often sexual in nature. Whilst neuroses, anxieties, and even creativity are sublimated sexual drives. In Freud's model, your early childhood experiences around sexuality, pleasure, shame, and repression are the foundation of your adult psyche. And to some extent, he wasn't wrong. Freud helped open the door to discussing sexual trauma, taboo desires, and the hidden power of repression. He revealed that humans are not as rational as we like to pretend. But for Carl Jung, Freud didn't go deep enough. Jung's sex as a symbol of something deeper. Jung didn't reject Freud's insights, but he felt they were incomplete. He believed Freud reduced sex to biology and pleasure and ignored its spiritual and symbolic power. In Jung's view, sex is not just a drive, it's a language. Libido is not just erotic, it's existential. Dreams are not always wish fulfillment. They're messages from the unconscious trying to restore balance. The unconscious doesn't just contain repressed memories, it also contains symbols, myths, archetypes, and spiritual wisdom. For Jung, sex wasn't merely about gratification. It was about union. Union between both the masculine and feminine within you, and the ego and the shadow, which is the physical and the spiritual, and the individual and the collective unconscious. In this way, Jung elevated the conversation around sex from mechanics to meaning. He didn't say that sex was less important. He said it was more meaningful than we realize. The mechanistic versus the mystical mind. This is where the rift between Freud and Jung became irreversible. Freud wanted psychology to be a science measurable, clinical, and rooted in physical reality. Jung, on the other hand, believed that the psyche was also mythological, that the unconscious spoke in symbols, and that those symbols pointed to something sacred. Where Freud saw sex as instinctual release, Jung saw sex as transcendence in disguise. For Jung, your sexual fantasies might not be about sex at all. They might be about your desire to be loved, seen, free, creative, or whole. They might be calling you toward change, expression, truth. And this is why Jung's teachings continue to resonate in a world overwhelmed with sexual content, but starving for sexual consciousness. Because when you reduce sex to a mechanism, you become mechanical. But when you engage with sex as a metaphor, as a psychic force, you unlock depth, purpose, and growth. Freud's trap stuck in the past. One of Jung's main criticisms of Freud was that he made the psyche too backward-facing. Freud's theories emphasized childhood wounds, suppressed instincts, and historical trauma. They looked behind you. Jung acknowledged the importance of childhood, but believed your psyche is also trying to grow, evolve, and transform. It doesn't just want to heal the past. It wants to create a future. So while Freud asked, what caused this symptom? Jung asked, what is this symptom asking you to become? And nowhere is this shift more important than in the realm of sexuality. Because if you only view your desires through a Freudian lens, you might endlessly analyze your childhood or try to fix your instincts. But through a Jungian lens, you begin to ask, what does this longing mean? What is this fantasy trying to tell me about my unmet needs? And what part of me is seeking expression? Not just release. That's not pathology. That's transformation. Why this matters today. We live in a world shaped by Freud's legacy. Sex sells. Sex is scandalous. Sex is primal. Sex is shameful. Sex is everywhere but rarely understood. Jung offers us a new way. Sex as mirror. Metaphor. Messenger. A symbol of your longing to become whole. This doesn't mean rejecting Freud entirely. In fact, integrating both perspectives, Freud's raw honesty about repression and Jung's expansive view of symbolism, might be the real path forward. But if you only focus on the mechanism, you'll miss the message. And if you ignore the meaning, you'll keep repeating the same patterns without ever understanding why. Carl Jung didn't tell us to deny our sexuality. He told us to reclaim its meaning and to stop pretending that our fantasies, desires, and dreams are meaningless or dirty. Because behind every erotic urge, every dream, every temptation, there may be something sacred waiting to be revealed. Part 7, the collective unconscious and erotic archetypes. If you've ever found yourself strangely captivated by someone's energy, almost magnetized by their presence, you're not just reacting to their appearance. According to Carl Jung, you're responding to an archetype. Jung introduced one of the most profound psychological theories in history, the collective unconscious. It's the idea that beneath your personal unconscious, your memories, your wounds, your desires lies a deeper layer of the human psyche that we all share. And in this layer live the archetype's universal patterns, images, and instincts that shape our behaviors, fantasies, and relationships. And when it comes to sex and attraction, these archetypes play a role far deeper than most of us realize. You're not just attracted to a person, you're attracted to a symbol. Ever felt an overwhelming connection to someone you barely know? Or been irrationally drawn to someone who triggers you? This could be a projection of an archetype from your unconscious onto a real person. For Jung, these archetypes are not conscious. They emerge through dreams, myths, religious symbols, art, and through your sexual fantasies and obsessions. And when you meet someone who mirrors one of these archetypes, it activates a powerful psychic force within you. You may feel like they complete you, like you've known them forever, like they awaken something ancient in your soul. But here's the twist. It's not really about them. It's about what they represent in your unconscious. The Anima and Animus, your inner lover. Two of the most powerful archetypes Jung identified are the Anima, the feminine within a man, and the Animus, the masculine within a woman. These are inner blueprints, images of the opposite sex that live in your unconscious. They shape your expectations in love, influence your attractions, and haunt your fantasies. And the Anima might appear as the seductive muse, the nurturing mother, the mysterious goddess. The Animus might appear as the brooding hero, the stern father, the distant genius. When you meet someone who fits this internal blueprint even slightly, it can feel electric. But Jung warned this is often projection. You're not seeing the person clearly. You're seeing your inner archetype reflected on them. And this is why relationships based on erotic intensity often implode. Because once the projection fades, you realize they weren't your soulmate. They were your mirror. Erotic archetypes in myth, religion, and culture. Jung believed that ancient stories and myths weren't just entertainment, they were maps of the unconscious. Sexual and romantic archetypes appear in every culture. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and sensuality. Lilith, the dark, independent feminine force. Eros, the god of desire, who blinds and awakens. Hades and Persephone, the myth of abduction, power, and transformation. The temptress, the siren, the forbidden lover, the sacred prostitute. These characters aren't just fiction, they are expressions of libido, psychological forces embedded in the human condition. And Jung showed that we continue to act out these stories unconsciously in our lives, particularly in our sexual behavior and emotional patterns. And we chase the unattainable. We crave danger or dominance. And we seek to save or be saved. Or we eroticize rebellion, submission, power, and purity. These are not random preferences. They are mythological scripts playing out through the archetypes within us. When the archetype becomes a trap. So what happens when you fall in love with an archetype instead of a person? You start chasing ghosts. You project divine qualities onto someone who is just as flawed and human as you. You idealize them, obsess over them, even become dependent because you think they complete you. But Jung warned that falling in love with an archetype is often the psyche's attempt to reconnect with a lost part of yourself. It's not about finding the one, it's about finding you. That willed, sensual, creative, powerful, mysterious part of you that you've disowned. The truth is, what you most desire in others may be the part of yourself you've forgotten how to love. Sexual projection as a spiritual wake-up call. The erotic charge we feel towards certain people is often not about them. It's about our own need for integration. When someone awakens your desire, they might also be awakening your creative instincts, your buried passions, your longing for meaning, and your need for inner union. This is why Jung never dismissed infatuation or obsession. He believed that what attracts us sexually is also what can transform us spiritually if we stop projecting and start reflecting. Ask yourself, what does this person symbolize to me? What part of myself feels activated when I'm with them? What myth am I unconsciously living out through this relationship? When you can answer those questions, the archetype loses its grip, the projection fades, and you're left with the real person and with a deeper understanding of your own psyche, integrating the erotic archetype. The ultimate goal, in Jung's view, was integration. You don't have to kill the fantasy. You have to learn from it. You don't need to repress your desire. You need to honor it as a messenger. Because when you integrate the erotic archetype, when you own your inner goddess, your inner warrior, your inner mystery, you no longer need someone else to awaken it for you. You stop seeking completion outside of yourself, and you become capable of real love, not projection, not possession, not idealization, but love grounded in wholeness. Part 8, Sexual Awakening and Individuation. Carl Jung didn't believe in taming the soul, he believed in integrating it. And when it came to sex, he didn't call for denial, shame, or blind indulgence. He called for awakening. Because at the heart of every desire, every fantasy, every shameful secret or electrifying attraction, there's something deeper, something sacred, something waiting to make you whole. That's what Jung called individuation, the journey to become your true self, your full self, your integrated self. And one of the most critical steps in that journey is facing your sexuality, not just physically, but symbolically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. What is sexual awakening? Really, most people confuse sexual awakening with physical exploration. They think it means trying new things, having more experiences, or breaking taboos. But Jung would argue that true sexual awakening is not about what you do. It's about what you finally see. It's realizing that sex isn't just something you crave. It's something that's been shaping you from the inside out. Every choice, every connection, every wound, every dream. Your sexuality is not a compartment. It's a lens through which you've been perceiving life, meaning, love, and power. And when you finally wake up to that truth, something inside you shifts. The shame lifts, the confusion fades. The energy becomes clear. Awakening the shadow equal reclaiming the self. To awaken sexually is to reclaim the parts of yourself you buried. The desire you were told to silence, the wildness you were told to fear, and the sensitivity you were told was a weakness. And the power you were told was dangerous. You begin to realize the things you've been projecting onto others, their confidence, their allure, their presence were always inside you. You weren't looking for sex. You were looking for permission. Permission to feel. Permission to express. Permission to be human. And that permission is the start of individuation. Because Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And few things are more painful and more necessary than confronting the ways we've abandoned ourselves to fit into a world that was afraid of our truth. Individuation becoming whole, not perfect. Individuation isn't about fixing yourselves. It's not about becoming pure, holy, or good in the moral sense. It's about becoming real. And in the realm of sexuality, becoming real means admitting what you want, questioning what you have been taught, holding space for your contradictions, learning to love without losing yourself, and letting go of roles and embracing your rawness. When you individuate, you no longer chase love to feel worthy. You no longer weaponize sex to feel powerful. You no longer fear desire as the enemy of your soul. Instead, you see desire as a bridge, a sacred current that can connect you to life, to others, and to yourself if you learn to walk across it with awareness. The role of the soul in sexual wholeness. One of Jung's most radical contributions was restoring the soul to the conversation around sex. In a world where sex is commodified, politicized, suppressed, or sensationalized, Jung invites us to see it as something spiritual, not religious, not dogmatic, spiritual as in connected to the essence of your being. When you honor your sexuality as part of your inner landscape, you stop splitting yourself in two. You stop seeing your body as the enemy of your mind. You stop living in exile from your own soul. This is the moment when healing begins, when fantasies no longer control you, but teach you, when attraction no longer confuses you, but informs you, when shame no longer silences you, but humbles you. Because sexual awakening is not about becoming more erotic. It's about becoming more alive. Signs you're moving toward integration. So how do you know you're stepping into individuation through sexual awareness? Here are some signs. You no longer hide from your desires, you inquire into them. You stop chasing constant validation. You learn to validate yourself. You feel less ashamed of your past and more curious about its messages. You attract healthier relationships because you're no longer outsourcing your wholeness. You embrace vulnerability not as weakness, but as power. You realize that sex is not something outside of you. It's a sacred expression of the life force within you. And when it's conscious, it's healing. When it's integrated, it's empowering. When it's honored, it's transformative. Final reflection, what you pretend not to see. So what are you still pretending not to see? The way desire shapes your decisions, the way shame silences your truth, the way you've used sex to avoid yourself or avoided it to appear good. Jung would say, the part of your sexuality that scares you the most is the very doorway you need to walk through. Not to indulge it, not to escape into it, but to understand it, because only then will it stop dominating you and start guiding you. That's the real message. Not that sex is evil, not that it's everything, but that it is a force, and that force deserves your attention, your honesty, your wisdom, because once you stop pretending not to see, you'll finally see what's been trying to awaken you all along. Your whole self. If this video stirred something deep inside you, good. That's exactly what Carl Jung wanted to awaken, what you've been pretending not to see. Now it's your turn to stop hiding from your desires, your dreams, and your truth, because real healing begins when you face your own shadow and reclaim the power buried beneath it. If you found meaning in this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And let me know in the comments, which part of Jung's message hit you the hardest? Until next time, stay awake, stay curious, and never stop looking beneath the surface.